Welcome to Everything All Right, the literary talk. Our guest today is Jenifer Saint, whose current novel, Elektra, leads the Sunday Times bestselling list since weeks. Congratulations and welcome, Jenifer.
Thanks so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. It's an honor. I can't really ask you what the book is about because the clue is in the title. So please tell us why you chose Elektra and equally the very intriguing point of views in the novel.
And so I was really compelled to write this book because I wanted to explore the subject of female rage, which I think is such an interesting topic. And women, particularly in mythology, particularly in the representations that we often see, don't really express that rage, or they turn it inwards, or it is suppressed, or anger is something that men do. And these are three women who are so strong and so powerful. And I think still so resonant today because they don't do that at all. They are not afraid to use their anger and their rage. They have had terrible wrongs done to them, and they don't have any other form of justice available to them. So they're going to make their own.
And let's go way back about yourself. How did you get into writing?
And so I wrote Ariadne, my first novel, whilst I was an English teacher. And I mean, I'd always wanted to be a writer. And I kind of got to my mid-30s and I realized that this was never going to happen if I didn't actually write a book. And really that is what there is to it. I just thought I have to give myself the chance to actually make this happen. And I'd kind of had this idea floating around in my head for a little while. So I made a New Year's resolution that I was going to write a book from start to finish.
Fabulous.
And that's what I did.
Well done, you. And how come the choice of Ariadne? Were you interested in the Greek myths? Did you study classics? What's your background?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in Greek mythology. It was like a real passion of mine from childhood. And I read it at university. It was my degree was in classical studies. But I didn't really have a clear idea of what I was going to do with that degree. I just knew that I wanted to spend more time with classics. And it was really when I was reading Greek myths to my own children that we came across the story again of Theseus and the Minotaur. And my son actually said to me, "Oh, what happened to Ariadne, by the way?" And it sparked the idea.
That is fabulous. So once you got serious and the New Year's resolution was fulfilled, how did you then go about finding an agent, which many beginning writers or nascent novelists find so hard?
Well, I have a bit of an unusual story for that one because I was writing the novel, like I said, as a New Year's resolution. I'd started on the 1st of January. When it got to, I think it was kind of May, around May that year, on Twitter, I was following a lot of literary agents and I had this one agent in mind. And actually, she tweeted that she was looking for something that was based in ancient Greece. And there was a charity auction, and you know, in publishing, these take place sometimes where publishers, literary agents, authors will kind of put up prizes, and sometimes the prize is that they'll give you a critique on your opening pages, your opening chapters. And Juliet, the agent that I had my eye on, was offering one of these, and it was for a charity that was raising money to reunite families who'd been separated at the Mexican border. There are these terrible headlines about, you might remember, children being kept in cages. It was a really upsetting news story. It was a really good cause, and it was a chance to get the opening chapters of my novel in front of this woman who I just felt I really wanted her feedback. And that was all I expected. I only expected to get a critique. I hadn't finished writing the novel. I sent her the first 50 pages. And she loved it. And she asked for the full manuscript, which I hadn't written. So that gave me like a rocket to finish writing. And I finished it by the summer. We went on holiday to France. My husband and my mother-in-law took the children. They just looked after them for 2 weeks. And I finished it. And then I sent it to her and she offered me a representation. So it was much faster than it normally happens. And obviously quite a serendipitous way for it to work out.
Well, you had something really good to offer. It sounds like a fairy tale. I'm so chuffed
It
for you.
was.
That's fantastic. But it's interesting because you just said your son said, by the way, what happened to Ariadne. Now, with Elektra, the clue is that everybody knows what happens to Elektra. So I wonder, how do you go about planning to create these turning points that Hilary Mantel quotes of saying the turning points that surprise the reader, you know, how do we get to the end that we know?
Yeah, I think I mean that's the challenge that I think we'll always face you if you're writing historical fiction and stories or events that people know. It's how do you keep that sense of suspense and surprise and making it feel fresh. And I think when it comes to mythology, for me, that usually comes from examining the motivations of the characters and changing the perspective. Obviously, who we hear the story from, I'm telling these very male dominated stories from the perspective of the women who are involved, and that changes the story in itself. It takes it to another kind of layer that's underneath the story that we know, and that throws up surprises along the way. But quite often it's, for me, it's about looking at how have these women's behavior been explained in previous versions, and how am I going to make that different? So we get to the same outcome. And I can give you one example for that is the character of Clytemnestra. In kind of traditional versions, I remember being told when I was 18, when she meets Cassandra, one of the other main characters in the novel and is the narrator, she feels jealous of Cassandra, and the two women are like pitted against one another. And for me, that didn't ring true with who Clytemnestra was. And I just felt it was such a misogynistic, typical, tired way of looking at women's relationships with one another, that they must be competitors, that it must be something petty, something vindictive going on. And I felt that Clytemnestra was actually a much more compassionate person than that. So I kept their encounter the same, avoiding spoilers, but I changed the reason for it. And I think that's how you find a surprise in a familiar story, is when you just view it from that other perspective.
So when you tread in the realms of myth, you obviously have that thin border where reality and imagination meets. So how do you go about your research apart from rereading the Greek myths themselves and what others might have written about them?
Yeah, so there's two strands of research, because there's the story and the characters, and then there is creating that Bronze Age world. And that's the more difficult part. It was more difficult for me writing Elektra because that was written during lockdowns. So I couldn't fly to Greece and visit the archaeological sites of Mycenae, or go to Turkey and visit what's left of Troy. I couldn't actually go and see these, and I couldn't go to museums to see artifacts that we have. So that was a little bit more challenging, because I am very visual. I think in my research, I like to find pictures, I like to find objects, I like to see textures. And so conjuring that up in lockdown, it was more challenging. I count myself really lucky that right before, I think like 2 weeks before we went into that first lockdown, I'd been to see the Troy exhibition at the British Museum and taken lots of photographs and made lots of notes. And apart from that, I did have to do that, the bulk of that research online.
I like how you called it the Bronze Age world. What finding touched you the most?
Um, oh, I'm not completely sure actually. Oh no, I do. Yeah, I do. I can't. In the ruins of their palace at Mycenae, which is where Clytemnestra and Agamemnon live with their daughter Elektra, there is this gateway, and at the top of the gateway there are two lions facing one another, looking quite ferocious. And sometimes it's called the Lion's Gate, and sometimes it's called the Lioness's Gate. And I found the idea of Clytemnestra, who's been portrayed as such a very ferocious woman, having these two lionesses at the gateway to her home, I thought was so full of kind of symbolic power that I really ran away with that one.
It's true, they have no mains. I've never thought about it actually, that gate
Yeah.
leading to McKinney. And did you find any scenes particularly hard to write, especially towards the end?
Um, yeah, I think I mean, there are some scenes which are so full of tragedy, and I think that I definitely find writing Greek mythology, as a mother, there are some parts of this novel that are particularly visceral. Um, but those are usually the scenes actually that, although there's kind of like a fear of taking them on, they are so pivotal and they're so crucial that they are the ones that I think I get the most out of writing as well.
You sound like a very fearless writer. I mean, you just sit down and get it done. It's a fantastic story. I love it. So, who inspires your writing?
I mean, so many people inspire my writing all the time. I think that a really significant influence on me has been Barbara Kingsolver, in the way that so my favorite book of all time is the Poisonwood Bible,
Mine
and I
too. Yeah.
I just I can see so much in that I aspire towards. It's just I love the way that she has different narrative viewpoints interweaving so seamlessly with one another, that she creates such distinct character voices, and the way that she just creates this world around you that you lose yourself in completely. I just think it's amazing.
So you mentioned that you worked as an English teacher. I don't know if you still do, but would you like to describe as your writing day?
Yeah, so I left teaching actually just before the pandemic. So I am a full-time writer now. And my writing days kind of become dictated by the routine of school at the moment, not school that I teach in, but my children's school. So I have to be quite disciplined, which sometimes goes better than other times, and right between the school runs. So I have that kind of 6 hours of the day where I just go to my study, I light a candle, I put on some ocean sounds or sounds of the forest. And like those things I think have become kind of I think because you have to be able to get into that headspace quite quickly if you haven't got the luxury of time, which nobody ever does. And so I think it's useful to have something like that, a candle or a particular sound or something that signals to your brain, we're writing now, this is it.
Is that your top tip for nascent novelists who perhaps have to carve out these 2 hours at 5 o'clock in the morning or at 9 o'clock at night when the kids are asleep? What would you advise them?
Yeah, I think definitely something like that helps you make that transition. And because you just haven't got time to sit around waiting for inspiration to strike or for it to feel like it's just the right moment. You just have to do it. And I think that I would always say to people, just remember that you can edit it, and the best writing happens in the rewriting. There's nothing worse than having that blank screen or blank page in front of you, but if you have written something, you can always make it better.
I like that. I caught already a tiny glimpse on Amazon of what is happening next year, but what is next for you? What can you tell us?
Yes, so I've taken on another heroine of Greek mythology, and this time she's very unique in the Greek myths because she is the only woman to have joined Jason and the Argonauts. So I'm going to be telling the story of Atalanta.
Is she the one with the golden apple?
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
golden.
I remember. You see, I remember my childhood myths very well. That sounds fantastic. So, Jenifer, we've already come to the end of our interview. We're just doing our little classic, the five faves, where without thinking very quickly, you have to tell me, please, your favorite movie,
Clueless.
favorite book,
I've already said the Poison Bible.
favorite music, piece, score, song.
Okay, I'm gonna say my favorite ever song is All Too Well by Taylor Swift. A bit
Your
of a
favorite.
heartbreaker.
I like Taylor Swift. Somebody else who deals with female rage.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what's your favorite food?
Oh, favorite food. I don't know why I'm finding that one the hardest.
There's so
My
much.
there's so much. My favorite food ever in the world is probably oh my God. I don't know why I blanked out on this one. Um, like my favorite thing to cook would be moussaka.
Oh, that leads probably to the favorite travel destination. Right on.
Oh, favorite travel destination, definitely Greece.
Must be Greece. Okay. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Everything all right? Thank you for joining. My guest today was Jenifer Saint, and we talked about her current novel, Elektra, which is published by Wildfire. Order it online, or better still, buy it in your local independent bookstore. I am Ellen Alpsten. Subscribe to Everything All Right, and listen and watch us next week. Thank you so much, Jenifer.